My father never said I love you. Not once. Not in 34 years. Not at my graduation, when he sat in the front row and clapped longer than anyone else. Not at my wedding, when he walked me down the aisle and kept his eyes very straight and forward, because I could see that if he looked at me he would cry, and he was not going to cry in front of everyone. Not when my daughter was born, and he held her for the first time with the particular careful reverence of a man holding something infinitely precious and breakable. Not once. And I spent most of my life believing that silence was absence, that the words he didn't say were words he didn't feel, that the door he never opened was empty behind it. I was wrong. I understand how he loved me now. I understand it completely. In a way I did not understand it until a Wednesday afternoon in a hospital room in Cincinnati, Ohio, when my father reached for my hand and held it without speaking. And in that holding, in that silence that was not empty but full of everything he had never found the language for, I understood 34 years of a love that had been there all along. My name is Claire. I am 34 years old. And this is the story of my father, and of the afternoon when silence said everything he had been trying to say for his whole life. My father's name is Frank. He is 6 to 7 years old. He grew up in a small town in rural Ohio, the son of a man who did not speak much and a woman who compensated for her husband's silence by speaking enough for both of them. Frank absorbed his father's silence and his mother's love and came out somewhere in between. A man who felt things deeply and expressed them practically, and who found, across 6 to 7 years, that this combination served him better in most situations than the alternative. He worked as a machinist for 38 years at a plant outside Cincinnati. The same plant, the same job, the same commute for 38 years, a consistency that I used to find baffling and that I now understand as the expression of a particular kind of love. He went every day so that we had a house, so that the heat was on, so that my brother Kevin and I could do our homework at a kitchen table in a home that was paid for and warm. He was at every game. I want to say that because it is important. My father did not understand soccer. I played soccer from age 8 through high school, but he was at every game. Rain, cold, early morning, inconvenient scheduling. He sat in the bleachers or stood on the sideline with his arms folded against the weather and watched me run around a field. And when the game was over, he said, "Good game." 2 words, every time. Not, "You were wonderful," or "I'm so proud of you," or "You played beautifully." Just, "Good game." At 8, I thought that meant he didn't really care. At 12, I had decided he was incapable of caring properly. At 17, in the particular fury of adolescence, I had decided he simply didn't feel things the way the rest of us did, that he was, in some fundamental way, emotionally unavailable in a manner that was his fault and my loss. I carried that conclusion for a long time. It shaped things. The distance between us in my 20s, not a formal estrangement, nothing dramatic, but a particular quality of managed warmth between 2 people who have decided, without quite saying so, that depth is not available to them in this relationship. Visits that were pleasant and surface level. Phone calls that covered the practical necessities. A father and daughter who loved each other and could not find the language that would have allowed either of them to fully know it. And then, when I was 33, my father had a stroke. Not devastating, he recovered, and recovered well, but significant enough to require hospitalization and a week of tests and the particular reorganization of attention that a health event in a parent demands. I flew to Cincinnati the morning after the call, and in a hospital room on a Wednesday afternoon, everything I had believed about my father's silence was quietly, completely revised. Before I tell you about the hospital room, I want to tell you what I found when I got to Cincinnati. Not in the hospital, before that. In the house I grew up in, where my mother met me at the door and where I spent the first evening while my father was still under observation. My mother, Patricia, is the opposite of my father in almost every measurable way. She speaks readily, expresses herself completely, says "I love you" with the frequency and ease of someone who has never had to think about whether the words are appropriate or sufficient. She has always been the emotional interpreter in our family, the one who translated my father's silences into something the rest of us could receive. She led me to the kitchen, and she told me something that reconfigured my understanding of 23 years of a relationship in about 10 minutes. She told me about the box. In the attic of our house, the attic I had been in perhaps twice in my entire childhood, there was a box that my father kept. A plain cardboard box, labeled in his careful handwriting, Claire. Inside the box, she had known about it for years, she said, and had understood instinctively that it was not his to show me or to speak about unless the moment required it. Inside the box were things. Every program from every soccer game he had attended. 22 years of them, kept in chronological order. Every report card I had ever brought home. Kept. Photographs, not the ones that were in the family albums downstairs, but different ones. Ones I had not known existed. Him and me, in moments I had not registered as significant. Me at 3, asleep on his shoulder. Me at 7, concentrating on something in a way he had apparently found worth photographing. Me at 16, laughing at something off camera, my face turned away so I could not have known he was looking. Letters he had never sent. To me. 3 of them, written in the same careful handwriting as the label on the box, on lined paper, put in envelopes that were sealed but not addressed. Long letters, the kind that take a long time to write. I did not read them that evening. My mother put them back in the box and carried the box down from the attic and set it on the kitchen table, and I looked at it for a long time without opening it. Because I understood, sitting in my childhood kitchen with my mother across from me and the box between us, that I had been wrong. Not about the words, he had not said them. That was real. But about what the silence meant. The silence had not been absence. The silence had been a man who did not have the tools to say the things he felt and who had found, instead, every other possible way to preserve them. I went to see him the next morning. He was in a room on the 3rd floor. Private room. My mother had asked for that, understanding without explaining why she understood that this particular reunion required privacy. He was sitting up in the bed when I came in. Pale, and smaller than I remembered him being. Illness has that effect, the way it quietly takes something of a person's physical presence, at least temporarily. But his eyes were clear. They had always been clear, the particular steady quality of eyes that observe more than they reveal. He looked at me when I came in, and I looked at him, and neither of us spoke for a moment. Not because there was nothing to say, because there was more than either of us knew how to say, and we were both, in our different ways, waiting for the right approach to it. And then I walked to the chair beside his bed and I sat down. And without thinking, without planning, without any of the conscious decision-making that I would have applied to this if I had been thinking about it, I reached out and put my hand over his where it rested on the blanket. He looked down at our hands, and then he turned his hand over, and he held mine. Pause. 6 seconds. We sat like that for a long time. I don't know exactly how long. Time in hospital rooms has a particular quality, elastic, slow, measured in a different unit than the time outside. Long enough that my mother, who had come in behind me and sat quietly in the chair by the window, eventually got up and said she was going to get coffee and left us alone. Long enough that the afternoon light shifted in the window. Long enough for 34 years of an unspoken thing to be spoken, quietly and completely, in the language of 2 hands. He did not say, "I love you." He didn't need to, because I could feel it. Not as a metaphor, I mean literally, physically, the way you feel warmth. It was in the way he held on. Not loosely, not perfunctorily, not the hand-holding of someone performing comfort. Firmly, the way you hold something you are afraid of losing. The way you hold something that has always mattered more than you knew how to say. I understood, sitting there with my father's hand in mine in a hospital room in Cincinnati, what 34 years of soccer games in the rain and good game and careful handwriting on program labels had been saying. All of it, every single bit of it, had been saying, "I love you," in the only language he had. And it was enough. More than enough. It was so much more than I had seen that I had to close my eyes for a moment to sit with the fullness of it. I read the letters that evening. Back at the house, after visiting hours, after my mother had made dinner and we had eaten in the particular quiet of 2 women who have both had a significant day and do not need to fill it with words. I took the box to my childhood bedroom, the same room, the same furniture, the same window, and I sat on the bed and I opened the envelopes one at a time. The first letter was written when I was 8 years old, the year I started playing soccer. It was 4 pages long, 4 careful pages, in my father's handwriting, about what it was like to watch me discover something I was good at, about the specific quality of my concentration when I was learning something new, about a moment in a game he described in detail, a moment I have no memory of, when I fell and got up immediately and kept running, and how he had watched that and thought, "She is going to be all right. She is going to be more than all right." He did not write, "I love you," but he wrote 4 pages about watching his daughter and what he saw and what it meant to him. And the love in those pages was so complete, so utterly unambiguous, that I had to stop reading after the first letter and simply sit for a while. The second letter was from when I was 18, the year I left for college, about what the house felt like without me in it, about how he had walked past my room on the first morning after I left and had found it very difficult to continue down the hall, about how proud he was, about how he hoped I knew, and the phrasing here was careful in the way of a man who is saying something important very carefully, how he hoped I knew that everything he had done for the last 18 years had been done because he wanted my life to be everything he had imagined for it. He did not write, "I love you," but he wrote, "I would do it all again. Every day of it. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." The third letter was recent, written in the year before the stroke, about getting older and looking back and the particular accounting that the later years of a life invite, about things he wished he had said, about a quality he had recognized in himself, the inability to say certain things out loud that he had always known was there and had always, he wrote, regretted. Not the feeling, the silence around it. He wrote, "I think you have always known I love you. I hope you have. But in case there was any doubt, there was never any doubt on my side. You have been the thing I was most proud of from the first moment I held you. I am sorry I was never better at saying it. You deserve better at saying it." I sat with that for a long time, and then I picked up my phone, and I called my father in the hospital. He answered on the second ring. "Dad," I said. "Claire," he said, quietly, in the voice I have known my whole life. "I read the letters," I said. A pause, and then he said, "Good." One word, but in his voice, in the particular quality of that one word, was everything. Everything. My father came home from the hospital 4 days later. He recovered. The doctors were pleased with how well and how quickly. He made adjustments, medication, diet, a commitment to walking that he has maintained with the same reliability he brought to 38 years of commuting to the plant. And something shifted between us, not dramatically, not in the way of a movie transformation where one significant moment rewrites every scene that came before it, but in the particular way that understanding shifts things, quietly, permanently, from the inside out. I called him more, not because I was obligated to, because I wanted to, because the conversation, even the short practical conversations that were his natural register, carried a different quality now. I could hear what I had not been able to hear before, the warmth underneath the brevity, the love inside the logistics. "How's the weather there?" Meant, "I think about you in your city." "Did Sophie have a good week at school?" Meant, "Your daughter matters to me because she is yours." "The car is making a noise. Take it to the mechanic on 3rd. Meant, "I am still trying to take care of you. Please let me." I started writing back. Not letters. That was his language, not mine. But texts. Long ones. The kind that said more than the immediate content. I found that once I understood the language he spoke, I could speak a version of it back. He replied to my texts in single words or short sentences, which is what he had always done. But now I could read them. "Good" meant, "I am so glad." "Yes" meant, "I have been hoping you would tell me this." "Okay" meant, "I love you too, Claire. I always have. We went to a soccer game together last spring. Not my game, my daughter's. My daughter plays soccer. She is 9, and the quality of her concentration when she is learning something new is exactly what my father described in the letter he wrote when I was 8. I watched my father watching her. He stood on the sideline with his arms folded against the spring chill and watched his granddaughter run around a field. And when the game was over, he walked over to her. And he said, "Good game." 2 words. She beamed at him, because somehow At 9, without any of the years of misreading that I had done, she already understood what good game meant. She already knew. I stood there watching them and I thought, the language was always there. I just had to learn how to hear it. The karma in this story is the stroke. Not as punishment. My father did not deserve illness as a lesson about expressing himself. That is not what I mean. But as the event that created the circumstances for me to finally receive what had been offered my whole life. The stroke brought me to Cincinnati. The hospital room created the silence in which two people who had never quite found each other could finally, without the noise of ordinary life around them, be still enough to feel what was there. The stroke created the box on the kitchen table. And the box created the letters. And the letters gave my father the words he had spent 34 years failing to say out loud. Not the courage. He had written the words. He had sealed the envelopes. The courage had been there in some form all along. But the bridge. The mechanism by which the love he had always had found its way to the daughter who needed to receive it. Karma is not always punishment and reward in the simple ledger sense. Sometimes karma is the event that provides what could not otherwise have been provided. The stroke that creates the hospital room. The hospital room that creates the silence. The silence that finally, after 34 years, says everything. My father and I are not the same people we were before that Wednesday afternoon. We are not suddenly verbose. We are not suddenly the kind of father and daughter who talk about feelings over long Sunday brunches. He still says good game. I still sometimes wish, briefly, that he would say more. But I hear him now. All of it. All the time. And that is more than enough. I want to say something to the daughters and sons. The ones who have a quiet father. Or a quiet mother. The ones who have spent years in the particular frustration of a love that is present in every practical way and absent in every verbal one. Who have been to every game and never heard I love you. Who have boxes that were never shown to them. Who have letters in sealed envelopes sitting in attics they have never been invited to enter. I want to say, the silence may not mean what you think it means. I know that is not always true. Some silences are genuine absences. Some people are truly not present in the way you need them to be, and that is a real and valid wound that I do not want to minimize. Not every quiet parent has a box in the attic. Not every good game contains a love letter, but some of them do. And the ones that do are not less real for being unspoken. The love that is carried in soccer game programs and report cards and letters in sealed envelopes and single-word text messages and a firm hand held in a hospital room on a Wednesday afternoon, that love is not diminished by its silence. It is simply waiting for the moment when the silence can speak for itself. And I want to say something to the quiet fathers, the quiet mothers, the ones who feel things at a depth they have never found the language for. Who have sat in rain-soaked bleachers for 20 years and said good game and hoped it was enough. Tell them, not necessarily in the way that is natural to me or natural to the world of words, in the way that is natural to you. A box in the attic, an unsealed letter, a hand held in a hospital room. But if you can, if the words are available to you even in the smallest form, tell them. Don't wait for the stroke. Don't wait for the Wednesday afternoon in the hospital room. Tell them now, in whatever language you have, because the words, even imperfect, even brief, even delivered awkwardly in a single phone call from a hospital room, change things. They changed everything for me. This has been Soul Tales. My name is Claire. Last Sunday, my father watched my daughter play soccer. When the game was over, he walked over to her, and she looked up at him, and he said, "Good game." And she said, "Thanks, Grandpa." And he put his hand on her head for a moment. And that was everything.